Hi everyone. I hope you've had a look at my last slide and you like the idea of the two books I have chosen for you to vote on. I shall be working out we can vote on that. So I expect Mr. Jens or Mr. McLean will be able to explain how we vote because I haven't quite thought of that bit yet. I've just thought about these two books sound really exciting, but I want you to have a little bit of a secret way of trying to work out which one you would like to hear next. And don't worry, whichever one gets the highest votes will be read first, but I will read the second book later. So don't worry if it's not the one you voted for, we will definitely get to have both books read. So we're on to our last three chapters of Fantastic Mr. Fox, and we got left on quite a cliffhanger that somebody was coming into the super cider cellar. So let's find out and finish the story today. Chapter 16, The Woman. Quick, said Mr. Fox, hide! He and Badger and the smallest fox jumped up onto a shelf and crouched behind a row of big cider jars. Peering around the jars, they saw a huge woman coming down into the cellar. At the foot of the steps, the woman paused, looking from left to right. Then she turned and headed straight for the place where Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox were hiding. She stopped right in front of them. The only thing between her and them was a row of cider jars. She was so close, Mr. Fox could hear the sound of her breathing. Peeping through the cracks between two bottles, he noticed that she carried a big rolling pin in one hand. "How many will you want this time, Mrs. Bean?" the woman shouted, and from the top of the steps the other voice called back, "Bring up 2 or 3 jars." "He drank 4 yesterday, Mrs. Bean." "Yes, but he won't want that many today because he's not going to be up there for more than a few hours longer. He says that fox is bound to make a run for it this morning. It can't possibly stay down that hole another day without food." The woman in the cellar reached out and lifted a jar of cider from the shelf. The jar she took was next but one to the jar behind which Mr. Fox was crouching. "I'll be glad when that rotten brute is killed and strung upon the front porch," she called out. "And by the way, Mrs. Bean, your husband promised that I could have the tail as a souvenir." "The tail's been all shot to pieces," said the voice from upstairs. "Didn't you know that?" "You mean it's ruined?" "Of course it's ruined. They shot the tail but missed the fox." "Oh, heck," said the big woman. "I did so want that tail." "You can have the head instead, Mabel. You can get it stuffed and hang it on your bedroom wall. Now hurry up with that cider." "Yes, ma'am, I'm coming," said the big woman, and she took a second jar from the shelf. "If she takes one more, she'll see us," thought Mr. Fox. He could feel the smallest fox's body pressed against his tightly, quivering with excitement. "Will 2 be enough?" said Mrs. Bean, "or shall I take 3? "My goodness, Mabel, I don't care so long as you get a move on." "Then 2 it is," said the huge woman, speaking to herself now. "He drinks too much cider anyway." Carrying a jar in each hand and with the rolling pin tucked under one arm, she walked away across the cellar. At the foot of the steps she paused and looked around, sniffing the air. "There's been rats down here, Mrs. Bean. I can smell 'em." "Then poison them, woman, poison them. You know where the poison's kept." "Yes, ma'am," Mabel said. She climbed slowly out of sight up the steps. The door slammed. "Quick," said Mr. Fox. "Grab a jar each and run for it." Rat stood on his high shelf and shrieked. "What did I tell you? You nearly got nabbed, didn't you? You nearly gave the game away. You keep out of here from this place now on. I don't want you around. This is my place." "You," said Mr. Fox, "are going to be poisoned." "Poppycock," said Rat. "I sit up here and I watch her putting that stuff down. She'll never get me." Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox ran across the cellar, clutching a gallon jar each. "Goodbye, Rat," they called as they disappeared through the hole in the wall. "Thanks for the lovely cider." Thieves! Shrieked Rat. Robbers! Bandits! Burglars! Chapter 17. The Great Feast. Back in the tunnel, they paused so that Mr. Fox could brick up the hole in the wall. Silly me. He was humming to himself as he put the bricks back in place. I can still taste that glorious cider, he said. What an impudent fellow that rat is. He has bad manners, Badger said. All rats have bad manners. I've never met a polite rat yet. And he drinks too much, said Mr. Fox, putting the last brick in place. There we are. Now home to the feast. They grabbed their jars of cider and off they went. Mr. Fox was in front, the smallest fox came next, and Badger at last. Along the tunnel they flew, past the turning that led to Bunce's mighty storehouse, past Boggis's chicken house #1, and then up the long home stretch towards the place where they knew that Mrs. Fox would be waiting. Keep it up, my darling, shouted Mr. Fox. We'll soon be there. That's what's waiting for us at the other end. And just think what we're bringing home with us in these jars. That ought to cheer up poor Mrs. Fox. Mr. Fox sang a little song as he ran. Home again swiftly I glide, back to my beautiful bride. She'll not feel so rotten as soon as she's gotten some cider inside her inside. Then Badger joined in. Oh, poor Mrs. Badger, he cried, so hungry she very nearly died. But she'll not feel so hollow if she only have a swallow some cider inside her inside. They were still singing as they rounded the final corner and burst in upon the most wonderful and amazing sight any of them had ever seen. The feast was just beginning. A large dining room had been hollowed out of the earth, and in the middle of it, seated around a huge table, were no less than 29 animals. They were Mrs. Fox and 3 small foxes, Mrs. Badger and 3 small badgers, Mole and Mrs. Mole and 4 small moles, Rabbit and Mrs. Rabbit and 5 small rabbits, Weasel and Mrs. Weasel and 6 small weasels. The table was covered with chickens and ducks and geese and hams and bacon, and everyone was tucking into the lovely food. My darling, cried Mrs. Fox, jumping up and hugging Mr. Fox. We couldn't wait. Please forgive us. Then she hugged the smallest fox of all, and Mrs. Badger hugged Badger, and everyone hugged everyone else. Amid shouts of joy, the great jars of cider were placed upon the table, and Mr. Fox and Badger and the smallest fox sat down with the others. You must remember that no one had eaten a thing for several days. They were ravenous, so for a while there was no conversation at all. There was only the sound of crunching and chewing as the animals attacked the succulent food. At last Badger stood up. He raised his glass of cider and called out, "A toast! I want you all to stand and drink a toast to our dear friend who has saved our lives this day, Mr. Fox." "To Mr. Fox!" they all shouted, standing up and raising their glass. "To Mr. Fox, and long may he live." Then Mrs. Fox got shyly to her feet and said, I don't want to make a speech. I just want to say one thing, and it is this. My husband is a fantastic fox." Everyone cheered and clapped, and then Mr. Fox stood up himself. "This delicious meal," he began, and then he stopped. In the silence that followed, he let out a tremendous belt. There was laughter and more clapping. "This is a delicious meal, my friends," he went on. "It is by courtesy of Messieurs Boggis, Bunce and Bean." Hooray! More cheering and laughter. "And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have." He let out another colossal belt. "Better out than in," said Badger. "Thank you," said Mr. Fox, grinning hugely. "But now, my friends, let us be serious. Let us think of tomorrow and the next day and the days after that. If we go out, we will be killed, right?" "Right," they shouted. "We'll be shot before we've gone a yard," said Badger. "Exactly," said Mr. Fox. But who wants to go out anyway? Let me ask you that. We are all diggers, every one of us. We hate the outside. The outside is full of enemies. We only go out because we have to get food for our families. But now, my friends, we have an entirely new setup. We have a safe tunnel leading to the 3 of the finest stores in the world. We do indeed, said Badger. I've seen 'em. And you know what this means, said Mr. Fox. It means that none of us need ever go out into the open again. There was a buzz of excitement around the table. I therefore invite you all, Mr. Fox went on, to stay here with me forever. Forever, they cried. My goodness, how marvellous! And Rabbit said to Mrs. Rabbit, my dear, just think, we're never going to be shot at again in our lives. We will make, said Mr. Fox, a little underground village with streets and houses on each side. Separate houses for badgers and moles and rabbits and weasels and foxes, and every day I will go shopping for you all, and every day we will eat like kings. Hooray! The cheering that followed the speech went on for many minutes. Chapter 18. Still Waiting. Outside the Fox's hole, Boggis and Bunce and Bean sat beside their tents with their guns on their laps. It was beginning to rain. Water trickled down the necks of the 3 men and into their shoes. He won't stay down there much longer now, Boggis said. The brute must be famished, Bunce said. That's right, Bean said. He'll be making a dash for it any moment. Keep your guns handy. They sat there by the hole, waiting for the fox to come out. And so, as far as I know, they are still waiting. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to announcing which book you have all voted for and starting a new book. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.